you know, every time I type in urban agriculture in Google, searching what's happening out there, I see more and more and more of this. And this is what a lot of research minds, young minds, are being directed towards. Look at Sky Farms. But, you know, after millions and millions of dollars in building these things, couldn't we just think about a simple solution? We have all the things that I've been showing you have been done on an absolute shoestring, pretty much with no budgets. Just finding the waste resources and the energy that we have in our own community and transforming the spaces that we have. And it's so possible. Changing the way slightly that we think about things so we can redesign our cities and our spaces. We don't need to have a techno fix for everything. You know, maybe a long time in the future we may need a couple of these things, but let's find other ways first before we head to this. And one of the things I think that's really critical is actually putting research energy into the community food systems, giving it value, giving it opportunity to flourish. And one of my first slides was talking about how in Australia 25% of our food comes from urban agriculture. We have no urban agriculture research. We don't know what the real situation is. We don't know where all the farms are. We don't know how much has been produced. We need to actually really look at it closely and allow our students and allow our minds to focus on that and consider, you know, developing up neighbourhood sharing schemes. We've got this great concept that's spreading through Australia like wildfire at the moment. It's called Permablitz. So we used to have on the telly this thing called Backyard Blitz, and they'd come in and in a day people would all come together, do your garden and transform it, but it was all exotics. So now, from a permaculture perspective, we do that permablitz. So you get all your friends and your neighbours to come over and in a day transform a whole garden. So you could do this for a community garden, you could do it for, you know, your weekend farming plots. And so and 1 month you go to someone's place and you do it the next month you go to someone else's place. So it's actually people starting to work together to create the edible landscapes. And not to forget what we're doing with all of this stuff. Our wastewater, our human manure, our compost. There are so many different ways of weaving these back into the nutrient building of our areas without spraying fresh sewage on our, you know, on our crops. We've been working with developing a lot of very safe and health department acceptable ways of treating our human manure and putting it underground into feeding orchards and so forth. So actually the roots of the trees pick it up by the time it's come up through the trunk and out through the branches and out to the fruit. You know, there's no toxicity there. It's clean, it's fresh. It's not like spraying it on greens. In my house I actually have a dry composting toilet. And so it's a no-flush system and it has no smell. It's a modern form of the traditional toilets from way back. And that way I get to actually collect all of the human manure and put it to all my fruit trees. And in this particular example is from that community in Denmark that I mentioned. And it has an interesting thing where it actually collects all the urine separately. You can see the little hole in the front. And it collects all of that from all the houses and sends that to a woodlot out of the back that's lined so it can't contaminate the ground. And this woodlot grows and they compost it regularly and use that as their highly efficient wood chip heater to heat them in the winter time because it's, you know, freezing cold up there. So the more that you weave into your woodlot, the more wood you're going to get for winter to heat you and keep you warm. So they're always having parties and plying their friends with beers and getting them to pee in the toilet so they get more fuel for the winter. And also lots of different ways to process your wastewater through flow forms and reed beds to actually recycle and cleanse water back into your landscape rather than sending it away to be treated elsewhere. Just a few final points. I think if we're looking at food production and food distribution, we also need to think about food processing and eating the food. Also in Denmark, their development was created so that they have clusters of houses, and in the centre of each cluster was a community building. And a very important part of that community building was to have a community kitchen and a community storehouse so that you could buy up lots of bulk foods, store it there, and also have good cook-ups so that you can actually have shared meals together. Traditional community ovens in the middle of an area. We have lots of those starting to emerge where they get fired up and people come together on certain days to bake bread together in the middle of a town. And it's a community sharing, it's a way of reconnecting. And cooking comes. You know, the more and more that we become busy in our lives, the more and more our food preparation skills go out the window. I mean, how many people prepare every meal that they eat every day? How many people would prepare 2 meals a day? How many, you know, we prepare food less and less in such a way that we're designing kitchens out of our homes, designing food storage out of our homes. We have no place to do this type of thing anymore. And we're forgetting some of the cultural heritage that we have around food that, you know, we're very proud of. You know, our ancestors, you know, in all countries, you know, our ancestors had this type of food and this type of seeds, and we know of it, but we don't know it. We don't know how to do it. And so actually ways of having community kitchens where people can start to share these skills again and relearn it and remember it and find new ways as well, not just going backwards. And so I think in finding good nutritious food and also creating a good culture for our children in which they're learning that and they're keeping our cultural heritage going. So as a summary, the sort of systems that I've seen around the world that kind of summarise community food programs, the cooperatives, the markets, the box systems, the community farms, land trusts, and also very importantly the community gardens, which I think are in many ways central to the transformation of all these things because they help to connect people back to the land, back to their community. So you do need to have an urban agriculture strategy in our cities. Every city now needs to start developing this and to look to ways to maybe create a centre for urban agriculture that has a really strong focus on researching these things, that we develop towards having a farm in every suburb and having community composting systems, that we think, what will our urban strategy be for Hong Kong? What will it be for Brisbane, for Melbourne, for Paris, for London? That we start to really think about it. The Brisbane City Council asked me a few years back to actually put forward proposals of what their food strategy could be through until 30 years planning. So 30 years is good, but it would be good to think even further beyond that and start to really take this seriously. So there's many things, in summary, all the things that we talked about that need to be incorporated in an urban agriculture strategy. But we also really need to take it personally. What can each and every one of us do actually to think global and eat local? Can we create our meals every day, every month, from food that's grown within 100 kilometres maybe? Maybe it's 10 kilometres, maybe it's 5. One of the things that I've done to encourage people in my community to think about this is organise local food picnics. And so each of us bring a plate of food to share that we've produced from as local as possible, preferably within 100 kilometres, but it ends up being within 1 or 2. And it helps us to identify where we can actually get local food and where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. It also helps to connect information. For example, when we were cooking up our meals, we really needed pepper. And we grow pepper in Crystal Waters or in Mullaney. And so we kind of had to say, well, this is all local except the pepper and salt. And someone said, oh, I know, there's a native pepper vine growing up on that mountain over there. And so we all went up and got cuttings from that and started replanting them. So it helps us. It's a community research project of finding out what our resources are. So we need to try and eat as locally as we can, local and seasonal food, and be aware of that when we're going to the shops. We need to think about supporting the local growers, participating in those local food initiatives, growing as much as we can, whether it be just a little window box or something to remind us. I think the more that we actually get involved in growing food, the more we realise actually that it is quite a challenging thing to do, to be able to produce food for yourself week in, week out, every week, all year. And in that process, it helps us to really really revalue what a farmer does day in, day out, every day, every year to feed us in the city. And I think even that simple fact of revaluing what the farmer does and to reconnect with the farming community so we produce what we can and then support local growers as much as we can. I think that's a really valuable role to play. So thank you for listening. I'll open up for questions now. I'd like you to stay behind too if you'd like to talk more.